Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work and create, the Kumbameri people of the Yungumbeh Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Hello and welcome to A Nourished Woman, the podcast. I am your host, Mikka Raer. This is a conversational series created to guide women towards a more true, whole, fulfilling and joyful way of living. Together with some truly incredible guests, we embrace what connects us to our vitality and some of the ways that we can nourish our minds, bodies and soul. A nourished woman represents a return to wholeness and reclamation of our innate wisdom, our body's intelligence, our appetite for life, and our capacity for joy, play and pleasure. It's about moving beyond mere survival and embodying a nourishing and generative mode of living that is aligned with our values, our energy, our desires, and honours the season of life we are in. Thank you for being here. Enjoy.
In this episode, I am joined by Monique Harding. Monique is a business coach, therapist, wife, mama, entrepreneur, and wannabe surfer. Monique believes that life is service, and it is her soul work to lead women to their fullest potential. Her superpower is illuminating yours, because she knows that powerful women change the world. They invest in their families and their communities. I first connected with Monique when I moved to the Gold Coast. Monique was my therapist and has been an incredible support with transitions I've moved through and my healing journey overall. I'm incredibly grateful for her. It was such a pleasure to be in conversation in this way with Monique. There is so much value in what she shares with us. A little disclaimer, we did have some tech issues, so you may notice a little lag here or there, but I know it won't take away from the potency of this conversation. Enjoy.
Okay. I want to kick off with a question that I ask everyone, which is, how would you describe the current season of life you're in?
Great question. Well, I am through the beautiful life cycle transition that is launching a child into school. So that was a biggie for me this year. And I'm definitely noticing now that I am probably stepping into a season that is a bit more focused now in on my passions, my business, rediscovering myself, time with my husband, feeling more like a couple than what we have in the last few years, which has been really, really beautiful. And just enjoying being really present in my parenting with my kids as well. Like now that they're that little bit more independent and doing things on their own. And, you know, that comes with a whole lot of roller coaster of emotions as well. But yeah, it's almost feeling like, and I mean, I'm not a huge believer in like the dominant sort of social construction of balance, but for me, like balance is very internal, and I feel very balanced in all areas currently, which is really, really nice.
Oh, I love that so much. I resonate with that as well, because I'm about to send my middle child, my other son, to school next year. So I feel like we're in this like strange transition where it feels like it's kind of snuck up on me as well. Like, how has that happened? And then I'll only have one at home with me, and then everyone will be at school next year. So it feels like this, I just really resonate with that. And also I feel like you're a new parent constantly throughout your life, you know, because obviously as they grow older and they have their own individual personalities and all of the different things, intricacies that come with that. It's like constantly changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've so observed that. And even just in this last year of Ruby starting prep, it's been this real kind of push and pull of noticing the distance between us of where I end and she kind of begins. Whereas I feel like that proximity was a lot closer prior to sending her off into school, whereas now she has her own little life there and her relationships with her teacher. And I don't get the story parks during the day of what they're doing. I rely on her, you know, giving that feedback to me. So we're really now like living our own little lives outside of ourselves and kind of coming together, which is beautiful and has been so lovely. But I would be being dishonest if I didn't say it's also come with some grief as well.
Yes, definitely. I feel like I'm in that now with Jonah going to school next year, very much so. So I wanted to let everybody know that I first connected with you as a therapy client, and that's how we know each other. And that's been a really special journey for me. And I wanted to say that it's been a real pleasure for me to see how things have changed for you over the last couple of years and kind of your journey. And I'd love for you to speak into the work that you're doing now and the transition from working solely in your therapy clinic to now coaching and kind of the maybe the reason behind that and the sort of greater mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like anything in life, there is a multitude of reasons and things that sort of informed that decision. I also kind of believe that it has come from just an integration of everything that I've kind of done and been and experienced in my life up until this point. Because people who do know me more as that, Monique, the therapist sort of side of things from my practice ritual counseling, that what they don't probably know is that my background prior to doing any clinical work was actually in business, was in organizational psychology. I used to work in mining, actually.
I did not know that.
Yes. There you go. So that was kind of, I was in recruitment for a while and then moved more into HR and then into kind of more people, sort of leadership side of things and very much into that psychology of people, but within organizations. And I left that space for a variety of different reasons. Got a bit sick of playing with the big boys in the boardroom and the things that kind of go on with women in that space. And yes, that experience in itself kind of sent me overseas for a while. I lived in South America and then I moved to LA, became a yoga teacher, sort of had my mid-20s, identity crisis, I suppose, or identity evolution. And decided, I guess, at that point that, I wanted to do something with some form of social impact. I wasn't sure what that was going to look like, but I knew that I wanted something more than working for big corporate. And so I went on to study sociology and I kind of like to think I'm a bit like Brene Brown sometimes. She's my fellow sociology sister. Not like her at all. But anyway. And so then moved obviously more into the clinical side of things, working in the psychology space, the counseling space, but still very much helping people make sense of themselves, make sense of their identity through their experience, rediscover parts of themselves that maybe they hadn't had access to for a long time, healing past trauma, lots of family of origin type work. Which is still, I should say, like a very big part of my life now. I still work in my clinic, albeit at a much reduced sort of hours. So now I'm there 1.5 days a week as opposed to sort of 4 days. And there was just this kind of beautiful evolution that happened in that clinic space. I ended up starting to do some work with the AIS, so working with Olympians and athletes and more in that sort of performance, I guess, like psychology side of things and really bringing that kind of into it. And I mean, that was sort of interesting because I was very clinical and I had the org psych and then a bit of performance-based stuff over here. And as I said, like I've always been just really motivated by impact and where I can make the biggest change, and kind of entered the online space in COVID, facilitating very therapeutic-based programs. I run a program called Make Peace with Your Past and another one called The Anxiety Antidote. So still very much about helping people like connect with different parts of themselves and sort of step into their highest desires. And I guess from that, it was just this very natural evolution. People started asking me about like, how did I go about that? And, conversations even in my clinic started to become quite systemic in nature. People were talking about, their business, their relationships, how everything was sort of interrelating. And I guess having that sort of, systemic way of thinking, like that ultimately is business and it's business thinking, right? So, I just gradually started to step more into working with women, but I guess more within that framework of female entrepreneurs to discover their strengths, to excavate sort of their brilliance and redefine like what can be online business for them to have the most impact in their, community and with their clients. And that's been really varied, to be honest, but I seem to attract similar people in terms of them knowing that they have some kind of incredible gift with inside of them, but there is some psychology block, environmental block, sometimes a skill block, like preventing them from actually developing the strategic thinking, fully stepping into it, fully owning their power, whatever that looks like, right? Whatever their definition of power is.
Yes. And so why is it important for you to keep working as a therapist as well alongside what you're doing with clients? I feel like you did kind of answer this a little bit, but I'd love for you to expand on it.
So many people ask me this question. Like pretty much every single coach has told me I'm crazy for doing that, mainly because the monetary exchange is not comparable, right? And so if you are, I guess, looking at this from purely financial and that was your only motivation, it makes zero sense for me to have that, that side of my business. There is a huge part of me though that is still, and I think perhaps will always be, I'm not sure, I mean that's a big statement, but is so invested in the power of the therapeutic relationship and what that unique container can actually offer people. I love the work that I do with couples. I feel like the relationship style work that I do there beautifully informs a lot of the coaching work that I do. People have very vulnerable, raw conversations in that space. And I also think deep down there's probably a bit of an accessibility element to me. One of my biggest values has always been around, making really good quality services accessible to people. And how can I go about that? How can I offer free things? How can I offer lower ticket things, like as well as sort of, higher value, higher price point services? And like therapy, obviously in Australia, we're very fortunate. It's accessible through, you get Medicare rebates, there's private health rebates. I just think there will always be a place for that within me. And I actually think that when people ask me that question and they struggle with me holding both of those parts, it reflects more about them than it does me, because that really is, a reflection of me being a multi-passionate, multi-part human, that I can hold those two spaces fully. And I don't feel like I'm choosing between, I'm not thinking about this part whilst I'm, sitting in my practice in Burleigh. Like I'm fully present and embodied in that work in that space.
Yeah. And as you said, it's kind of, it's values driven for you. You mentioned, why you got into the work in the first place, wanting to have an impact. And then I just feel like that's so tied with then the accessibility piece as well, that it should be available to more people. And I imagine, like you said, so much of the work in the clinic informs the work. There'd be so many correlations that you would see between, what's happening. And I remember speaking to somebody else on the podcast speaking about just meeting the need. And I feel like the need would be presenting itself in your clinic,
Yeah, absolutely. And also just different clientele, right, are attracted to the two different services.
Of course.
It's funny because when you say that, meeting the need, I also think that a lot of my coaching services, particularly in the early days when I was running, I guess more like holistic sort of life business programs. And not to say that my coaching isn't still holistic. I guess it's maybe just a little bit more targeted now in terms of very much being about the self-exploration, sort of informing business success. But when it was a bit more sort of holistic life and business coaching, a huge motivator for starting that was because I was seeing people in the clinic perhaps, once a month for 50 minutes. Now there's not a lot of change that comes from once a month, 50 minutes. I mean, yes, conversations have ripple effects and I fully believe in that, but, people were really needing more of that in the moment support. Like, Monique, I'm having a panic attack in my room, or I'm overwhelmed with mum guilt at this situation, and being able to support humans in that way, I actually feel like that gave me the greatest insight into what makes my clients tick, what their needs are, and just like the actual depth of what actually goes on inside of us as human beings.
What are, I mean, I personally, I feel like there's been this collective feeling of, I don't know, just a bit of intensity this year. This year's felt quite dense for a lot of people. I know, certainly for myself. I'm wondering if you have noticed any kind of patterns amongst the clients you've been working with in terms of challenges that they've experienced this year.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I feel like 2023 in particular, probably more again from that psychological perspective, there's been a lot of self-inflicted pressure and almost like this need for collapsing time, I would say. And what I mean by that is people expecting things at a pace that I just don't think would have been even considered available to you, a couple of years ago. And I often wonder where that's come from. Like, I feel like there's definitely just a collective greater appreciation for the fragility of life. So I wonder if some of it is almost like born out of that anxiety of us appreciating that more. And I'm also always really conscious of the life cycle stage of the majority of the women and non-binary folk that I support, that they're sort of in that, typically 30s, sort of 40s season of, if they've chosen to have children, they've probably got quite young kids. They're sort of moving into maybe that new season of launching children off to school. So there's changes happening there too. So sometimes I think mentally that can create a bit of a, I've got to catch up sort of mentality of like, okay, I've been in my motherhood phase. Now I'm fully in this. And it's almost like, I don't know, it's kind of like that shiny object syndrome, isn't it? It's like, okay, well, I'm in this now. This is available to me. I better make the most of it, because how long am I going to have left, kind of thing. I think there's multiple things impacting it, but that's certainly been what I've noticed, is just this real, like, almost like I've tried something and I tried it once and it hasn't worked, so it just mustn't work. Which is not something that I have observed over the last couple of years being in the online space, I must admit. That there historically, I think, has been a lot more patience and, probably a lot more, like, discipline isn't the right word, but maybe like ongoing commitment to things taking time. And almost like an appreciation of that process too, which I don't necessarily feel still exists.
Yes. I actually just recently have been thinking a lot about how, and this was after a conversation I had with someone about the idea of the long game, and not just within business either, like within life, within relationships, all sorts of things. And I just feel like I'm entering this season of like not wanting to rush. Like there's no real urgency. It doesn't mean that I stay stagnant and don't move in any way, but just I don't need to race. And oh my God, I feel like since I've kind of even just said that and am claiming that for myself, I've felt a real shift in the way that I move even day to day within my work and also just with my children and all those kinds of things. So that really hits, because I feel like I can't even pinpoint what it is either as to why that's kind of been this collective vibe. But all I can say is I'm ready to enter into my like slow woman phase and just take things one step at a time.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think it's like this real return to presence, perhaps, isn't it? Which you have to think, like, you and I have, I guess we're similar sort of vintage, similar age children. Like, you think about raising children of that age, like it does almost like take you a bit outside of yourself, doesn't it? Because you know, your priority is on their safety, their well-being. Like it removes that experience of you really being present in your own body, in your own mind, because it's almost like you're kind of like intrinsically linked with this other person's body and mind in a way. So I wonder if almost like, I don't know, from a nervous system perspective, it's something that you crave as like your children get older as well, is like returning to that state of actually being in choice.
Yes.
Because I do think sometimes the nervous system stuff is a bit misunderstood. Like it's probably a bit of my pet peeve, I must admit, in the online space, is people that are like, I'm a nervous system practitioner now. I'm like, are you? Like, how? And just, I think often people think that, you know, a well-regulated nervous system is a very calm nervous system, when that is just not true. Like it's about being present. It's about being in choice. It's about being in your homeostasis of energy. And even for you and I, that's going to be different, right? Based on our temperament, based on our natural disposition.
Yes.
So that is something that I actually am loving about, well, at least the conversations I'm having. I don't know if they're broader than that, but, you know, it's really coming back to, well, what is your natural way of being, and how can we create something magical that serves people at a deep level around what comes most easily for you? Because I know if I tried to be calmer and softly spoken and like, you know, I don't know, going and having my naps every day, like I'd fall into a heap, because that's not naturally my sort of basis of how I operate. Like I need a little bit of kind of higher vibe energy to keep me going, kind of thing. And I'm used to that. But then I have other clients who they thrive in having a very, very clear schedule and lots of spaciousness in their day. And I see their creativity just absolutely bloom in that environment. So I really think it's just about, it is that self-exploration piece. I don't understand how people can serve others in service-based businesses without you deeply understanding yourself. You can never meet someone at a deeper level than the level in which you know yourself.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is like the foundation of this podcast, I think, in these conversations I'm having is, you know, everyone that I've spoken to so far has really been someone who's been a part of my journey, self-exploration and learning more about myself. And I think what they're doing and what they believe in and all those kinds of things are, I'm wanting to share them because I think it's potentially something that someone listening might connect with. Like there'll be something in every conversation for them, and they might be like, that feels true for me. You know, I want to follow that breadcrumb. Because an understanding of yourself is the basis of everything, and leading a life, potentially having a business, if that's for you, that feels most true. You have to have an understanding of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, in my work over the last couple of years as a business guardian, I've seen a big correlation between the overall health and well-being of the women I support and the health of their business. Wondering if you've seen that and if you wanted to speak into any of the experiences you've had with some of your clients around this, and maybe even yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, it would be very rare that you would see somebody who is, and I say successful and not necessarily, you know, capitalistic sort of definition of successful. Although that's, you know, rings very true for a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with that as well, right? But whatever your unique definition of success is, it's very rare to see somebody who is embodied in that, who isn't firstly and foremostly devoted to their own physical, mental, spiritual well-being.
Yes.
I couldn't even think of an example off the top of my head, right? Like, and there may be people that, I don't know, even the listeners are thinking of that, well, Monique, what about this person in the media? You will, if you actually started to deep dive into some of those people's stories, you would find potentially some alternate storyline around, I don't know, like addiction or upper limit problems or things that are kind of happening in their life that may actually not be reflective in the dominant storyline that we're seeing. So I truly believe that it's that old saying, isn't it? Like, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Like, your well-being, what lights you up, what nourishes your physical and mental health has to come first above all else.
Yes.
And it would probably, like, when I go to whether it's hire support in my business, be it, someone to work with me on my podcast, or to work with me from more of a systems administration perspective, or even a coach, that is always a question that I ask.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested in how they're looking after themselves, because I know then that is going to then transcend into how they are then able to support me.
To support you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And for me, like that, I know you asked me at the start, actually, like that looks kind of different, but also sort of similar most days.
Yeah.
Like, my absolute non-negotiable is some form of movement. And some people will say that, that means that I'm rigid. Like, I would say that I'm disciplined, and I know myself really, really well, that when I don't want to move my body, it's not my higher self speaking.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that every day I'm going to a strengths-based HIIT class or going for a 10K run. It means that I'm, intuitively following what that movement looks like, but there's some kind of movement there.
Yeah.
I'm very devoted to healthy, nutritious food. That almost feels like a bit of a spiritual practice to me, is what I fuel my body with.
Yes. Amen.
And I think some form of connection. Like, I work alone the majority of the time, and what people probably don't realize as well about being a therapist, because, you think that you speak all day. I don't speak about myself at all. Right? Like, it's a total, in that environment anyway, it's very different in the coaching, dynamic. It's a bit more like almost, there's a friendship there. There's a bond. Like, my clients, I'm very connected with. But even working on your own, it can be a little bit lonely. So I think, like, having people that I can be vulnerable with, that I can speak truthfully to, that can hold space for me, is just so vital as well.
Yes. You mentioned balance earlier on in the conversation, and I oh my God, I mean, the word's been just overused. I think of it now more like harmony.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's my word for it. And obviously you are someone who wears a lot of hats. You have children, you have a husband, you have two businesses, essentially, two ways of serving people. So what does that look like for you? What does harmony look like for you? And you said you feel like you're experiencing it at the moment. So yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, and this is the thing, right? I love that harmony frame of thinking about it, because it really is more of a internal felt state for me than it is an external measure.
It looks. Yeah.
Today, for example, I was saying to you, I've been a little bit under the weather over the last week. My harmony today is going to look very different to my harmony on a day where I am in my 5-1 generator, just like, churning the engine, right?
Yeah.
Today I slept in the latest that I probably have in a couple of months, I reckon. Like, I'm normally 4:30 a.m. I'm jumping out of bed ready for the day. Today, my body needed the rest. And that's me being in harmony, living in that alignment of, intuitively knowing what I need. And I feel like that's probably the balance, the harmony intersection, right? It's knowing yourself, trusting yourself, spending enough time creating conscious thinking, conscious self-connection practices to actually, like, trust that intuition, and to not think that it's fear or scarcity or some self-saboteur that's come in, which is, to be honest, for people that have done a lot of self-work, is actually rarely the case. It's about you connecting those two together, right? And checking in with yourself regularly and living from that place of being in alignment.
Yes. I love that. I love that so much. What do you believe, or maybe what have you seen stands in the way of women achieving, optimal kind of, I don't even necessarily love the word optimal, but like the desired kind of state of health and wellness that they really want, and building businesses and living their lives in alignment with what they really want?
Patriarchy, if I'm
Oh.
honest.
Yeah.
Like, it is, right? Like, it's it's not that, and I think this is like, oh gosh, I could talk about this for hours, but it's not that this patriarchy exists outside of us. It exists within us, right?
Yes.
It's this felt experience of needing to have the harmony all the time, making it wrong when we're not in harmony. Like, I just feel like women in general, we have been conditioned for decades to believe that there is something wrong, flawed, that we could always be doing better.
Yeah.
Right? And
that we're not enough.
We're not hormonally designed that way, for starters, right? Like, we don't have that, masculine 24-hour hormone cycle that they're blessed with.
Linear,
like, gosh, that just feels so foreign. But yet we live in a world that is, trying to promote that, right?
Yes.
I think sometimes, and this is probably, again, like why the coaching side of things felt like such an important step for me, was because, I really feel like we've gotten too individualistic. We look at everything as being something inside of us. Oh, it's my growing up experience. It's my trauma. It's my anxiety. It's my ADHD. Well, how about we zoom out and have a look at what's going on societally, knowing that you exist in a system, you're constantly responding in feedback to that system, and you alone actually don't exist without the relationships that you have with others. Your definitions of yourself are a mirror of how you feel about every single person around you. You might be earning $10 a week, but you're in a country where everyone else is earning $2, and all of a sudden you're a millionaire, right?
Yes.
Your context and your self-perspective can change very, very quickly.
Yes. So is there anything else other than kind of zooming out that you think could help, heal the disconnect between what it is we want and then our actual choices and our reality?
What do you mean by that? I'm not sure if I understand that.
Oh, so you mentioned about like the zooming out and that being really key to like gaining perspective and context and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Do you think, and obviously having an awareness of the system we exist in, I think obviously there's a lot of conversations about that kind of in the collective. But how do we as women heal the disconnect between what it is we really want, whether it's what we want to be doing or how we want to be living, and then the choices we make, and then how that informs our reality?
Well, I think it really comes back to, again, sort of what we were talking about before around checking in with your expectations on pace and process of change. Because my observation and experience has been that when we start to recognize that there is perhaps a challenge or a pattern in our stuckness, we then develop language for it, which is like that next beautiful step of being aware and being able to then, do something about it. But we then jump very quickly to what it would look like to be fully healed, or almost on the total opposite end of the spectrum of where we currently are in our stuck, familiar, habitual pattern, forgetting that our nervous system hates abrupt change.
Yes.
It's literally like allergic to it. Like, the more you pendulum swing in your life, regardless of if it looks brilliantly beautiful, amazing, it's everything you wanted, if you are not tearing your process to change, you're not tearing your process to transformation, you will pendulum swing right back to where you started, sometimes even further back than where you were before. And I think that's often then the stuck cycle of like, it didn't work, I failed, because you haven't changed your identity in that process, right? You haven't evolved in terms of the beliefs, the thinking, the perspectives of who you are to be able to hold that new pattern sustainably. So we need to break down these steps into really small micro steps of, okay, well, I've seen this stuck pattern inside of myself. I don't know. I'm doubting myself. I know that I want this thing over there. It feels really far. What would be the first thing that I could do today to start to be that person? What would be the first micro step of embodiment, which may be as simple as choosing a different thought? It may be you putting a reminder on your phone to take a couple of deep breaths if you're feeling a bit dysregulated. It might be you, I don't know, going out and eating in the sun rather than sitting at your desk. It's like, it could be so small, but those micro small changes are what support your nervous system to feel safe in transformation, to feel safe in change, which will foster more of it.
Yes. It's like building a muscle. You know, you can't go from like lifting 5 kilos to lifting 50 in a day.
No, exactly.
You know?
But it's funny, I think sometimes we don't think about our brains in that way, right? We don't have that same appreciation for process, for time, because it is like a little bit hard to get your head around, isn't it? Because, you know, if you can think a reality, then I am a big believer that there is a version of you somewhere that already holds that. So that energetic alignment is there. However, that version is unlikely to be tomorrow.
Yes.
It starts with the thought, but the action then has to follow that.
Exactly. And we have to continue to give ourselves evidence. And this comes from those micro steps, right?
Yes.
Giving ourselves, our nervous system, whatever it might be, our brain, all the things, you know, the evidence that, and this is how we eventually move into mastery.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love this so much. You spoke a little bit about this, and it was something I wanted to touch on in your Insights and Echoes newsletter about quantity leads to quality. So that what you said there really reminds me. Did you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, it absolutely just comes back to that, right? You know, everything, you think about every single thing that you are skilled at in your life, it's highly likely that it's something that you have done a number of times over a number of years. And I was speaking in this newsletter about, you know, just witnessing my son being the younger in the sibling dynamic and him kind of getting frustrated and looking at Rubes and, you know, saying he's not as good at drawing and he's not as good at riding his bike or his scooter or, you know, all the things. And it's just even, you know, in that young youthful mind, it's like we're conditioned still for comparison, aren't we? Yes. And looking ahead without the appreciation of the process.
Yes.
I was recently listening to, it was one of Alex Hormozy's podcasts, and he was saying if people knew how much time went into him writing his book, they wouldn't think it was that impressive. And I thought that was really potent, right? Like we measure everything on the output of, wow, look at this book. It's amazing. Oh my gosh, look at Mikka and her incredible podcast. Yeah, great. How many hours have been spent in the background refining that craft, doing the self-work to build the confidence and the self-belief to put yourself out there in this way, and then actually doing all of the do of what it takes to actually put something out and launch it into the world as well, right?
Yeah, this is it. And it's like also, you know, it's like having structures and systems and all that, like particularly unsexy stuff in the background of your business. But it doesn't, like people see the success, right, of someone's business and they don't understand all of the things that are kind of working in the background, you know, like clockwork to make sure that it supports that. Makes me think of that. And what you were saying about your son, you know, there's 4 years between my eldest and the next one, and very much like wants to be doing exactly the same things, which is quite interesting. And it made me think about a Bluey episode. We love Bluey, but it made me think about the Bluey episode where they're drawing and the dad talks about someone telling him that he wasn't very good at drawing cars, so he just stops drawing cars. And the mum's really good at drawing because she like really kind of nurtured that skill and just kept at it and kept at it. it really reminded me of that. God, I feel like everything. We love Bluey.
So many life lessons in Bluey, isn't there?
So many life lessons, so many tears. I swear to God, I've cried in that many episodes.
Actually, an adult show. Let's be honest.
It is. It's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. Anyway, we've gone a little bit off topic, but we love Bluey. I know all the mums listening also love Bluey. Okay, I want to get into now because I feel like we've sort of touched on it a little bit, but get into some more business chat. And I'd love to know, actually, I wanted to ask you this earlier, but we didn't get there. I'm curious because you speak a lot about like your values informing, the way you do business and the way you build your business. So would you like to share what yours are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's the way that, yes, I have built my business, but it's also the way that I work with my clients, right? Like anybody who engages in some kind of private coaching with me, it's the sort of first step, I guess, that we go through is really setting that intentional vision of what's most important to them. What's their enough number? Like, honestly, how many people do not think about that? If you do not have a number in your head of what you are wanting to achieve, then you are prone to not enough, unrelenting standards, thinking and feelings. It's like one of the easiest problems to fix straight off the bat. And then I guess defining as well, what are you, like, what's the overall, mission and goal of this business? Is it a lifestyle business? Is it, more about you having that time flexibility, that creative flexibility? Or is it that we're building a business to scale? And so ideally you're wanting to sell this off in the future. So then we're looking more at money flexibility type things. And so I think from a values perspective, yes, I start there with my clients, but when I, started my coaching business as well, like that was a huge part of what informed the structure of my offerings and has continued, I guess, to evolve them over time. I'm in a position now where currently I don't offer anything self-paced, evergreen sort of within my business because I really value integration. I value intimacy, connection. And I think, probably the therapy background has informed this too. I'm a big believer in relationship and connection sort of being the potent change maker within people's lives. Our conversations, our connection, me being in partnership with you and your business and understanding that really, really deeply is the thing that ultimately leads to change. And I often wonder, like, how would this look if I didn't have that same proximity with my clients? I'm a true partner with them. The majority of my clients I speak to every single day. I know every part of their business. And it's just such a joy because I work with them really long term. Most of my clients have been with me now for a couple of years, which is like so, so beautiful.
Yes. I was going to say that's a really beautiful thing. So you speak about strengths-led business being really important, personalized business. So I'd love for you to expand on that and maybe describe, how we can unlock more of us within our businesses and the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is, I guess, the whole framework that makes me unique as a coach as opposed to all of those other, business coaches that are out there that, have their own unique way of working with people that is equally brilliant, but different. And the strengths driven part is such a, important, again, like values base of, what has informed the creation of my coaching framework. I'm a big believer that it's not necessarily my wisdom, my experience that people need. Sometimes, yes, it is. It is, the things that I know and the things that I have been through. And sometimes it is the process of change that I'm skilled in, the way that I'm skilled in bringing out other people's brilliance and helping them understand themselves in ways that they've never understood themselves before. And when I think about strengths, I'm thinking about things such as, yes, your, built up expertise that you have learnt, your talents, things that have probably been there from a very, young age. But then also, those skills, those natural ways of being inside of you. You know, the way that you talk when you are with your longest known friend, the way that you are within your family, what play means to you, how you naturally communicate. Like, who are you at the party? When you go to the party, like, are you the person that is bringing everybody on the dance floor? Are you the D&Mer in the corner? Are you serving everybody the food? You know, and the way that correlates into business is in pretty much every area of your business. The way you design your offerings, as I said, I value a lot of intimacy. I like to go deep with people. Wouldn't make sense for me to have low ticket, high volume offerings where they have no access to me. That wouldn't really feel aligned. And then also in terms of like your marketing, right? In how you show up online, in how you launch. You know, I had a client recently who just beautiful projector in human design, more on the highly sensitive sort of profile, but has a beautiful ability to really connect with people deeply one-on-one. And we were talking about launching, and she's worked with a few coaches before, and she was just saying how, you know, the thought of being in that big launch energy on Instagram, online, emails just feels so misaligned for her. So we redesigned her whole launch process to be about having one-on-one conversations with people, and off the back of a form of freebie that felt very personalized, that, you know, these days we've got beautiful tech that can support those kind of things. But just doing that in a really different way, in a way that felt, you know, quite unique to her. And you know, she's gone on to have her biggest launch. She's been in her business for about 7 years now. And I am such a believer, because her nervous system was so calm throughout it, and she did it in a way that she could really get behind when she was showing up, inviting people, when she's reaching out in a personalized way to people in a word of mouth way. That felt very natural. There was nothing forced about it. Whereas that's just not the dominant narrative about online business.
No.
If it's all around it being, you have your ascension model, and you do your big launches, and you plan them out in your calendar, and you have your free event, and it's all kind of designed again for people that are very high energy, like extroverted. And I mean, I would identify as somebody with those traits, but even for me, sometimes that feels like a lot. So I can't imagine then, you know, what that's like for people that aren't so inclined.
And that's what enables our real authenticity to come through as well.
Exactly.
And that's, you can feel that, like, you know, even through a screen, you can feel when someone's speaking in a way that's really authentic to them and when they're not. I wanted to speak a little bit about your podcast, Rising Femme. And I know when you launched it, you hit the charts pretty quickly, which is amazing. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
In a category that is mostly filled with male, stale, and pale. And I know that we spoke a little bit.
Didn't I jump on that storyline?
And I'm glad you did. And I mean, obviously we've kind of spoken into the patriarchy already a little bit. But something that you posted, I think it was earlier this week, was just about wealth in the hands of women and what that ultimately means. So I'd really love for you to speak into that, because I think it's really important here in this space. Yeah.
Would love to. I can, you know, when you have those moments in your life and you hear something and it's almost felt in your soul. And I can still remember sitting in, was a lecture in my master's, and master's programs are quite small, so it was more of a classroom environment, and was about community change and how do we solve some of these big social problems in the world, and what's the research, what's the evidence around that, to, you know, big issues in, you know, often third world countries. How do we go about that change, and, you know, problems and issues that kind of feel a bit hopeless at times. And the lecturer up at the front of the room was bringing all of this research back to one common denominator, that the key to unlocking any kind of broad social community global change is through empowering women.
Yes.
Because I get goosebumps and I get teary. Because when there is wealth in the hands of women, and whether that's, you know, wealth as defined by Australian standards or in a third world country context, there is a consistent, predictable pattern that ensues in that women will invest at a 60+% higher rate than men in community, in their children, in families, which is the key to infiltrating that change.
Yes.
Healing that future generation, empowering them, sending them to school. And that's a huge values component within my coaching business too. You know, I have a charity partner as such that I invest every month a certain percentage of profits into a platform called Kiva, and they microfinance loans for people in third world countries. And my children and I pick a entrepreneur that is often, you know, might be in the Philippines or is in a third world country, and we support them to, you know, finance their shopping cart on the corner or send their kids to school, and I think that is just so important to instill those values in my kids as well, who live a very, what I would consider quite privileged life. And it's just, I just can't ever forget that moment. Just hearing that, I knew it's like, I want to, like, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm here to do, to help empower women to fully step into their brilliance and their power and create that ripple effect and that change.
Yeah. Well, that's true, because I feel like women change the world. I think it's time now. I think we've reached this point now where we should just hand it over.
It is interesting though, like
we can clearly see, it's not even a laughing matter, but we can clearly see that the way it's been going is not
I don't know if you saw it it was probably a few months ago now, and they were talking about the changing the changing landscape of billionaires by gender in Australia. And they were saying how, I think it's over 50% of billionaires in Australia are female. What they failed to report was nearly 50% of those people are from the Reinhardt family.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one family of people that make up, like, not quite, right? Like, you think about the 60% of that wealth, great. But if that's coming from one small percentage, we're sort of missing the bigger picture there, right? But I do think that, you know, I'm certainly not going for that, you know, larger, bigger scale, but I think that there is a lot of change to be made and a lot of impact to be had at working in this micro entrepreneurship space with women that are craving more money flexibility, more creative flexibility, and more time flexibility.
Yes, that's it. And this is what it all comes back to, your own definition of what success looks like for you. And that literally informing everything. You wrote a really great post that I loved about that our strengths can also be, and because we're speaking about strengths-led business, can also be our weaknesses. And I'd really love for you to talk about this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this sort of strength shadow idea. And I guess, you know, it all comes back to, like, it really does. The more I think about it, it all comes back to, like, I guess your foundational psychology, right? Those beliefs that you have around the way that the world works. And in order to appreciate your strengths and your shadows coexisting, you first need to have a belief and an acknowledgement that life is full of duality and the both and exists everywhere.
Yes.
So, you know, you think about, for example, within myself, to give a personal example, I'm somebody who has almost worn a bit of a badge of honor that I work great under pressure. I give the task to Monique at the final hour. I'm the hardest worker and I'll push it through. Nightmare when I'm managing a team. Absolute nightmare. Like, total shadow part, right? Like, it very easily can translate into a weakness. The same with, I guess, that big sort of generator energy can be great, but then I have a tendency to pour hours and hours into, my business, which is my absolute passion and soul work, at the expense of sometimes not realizing what the time is, and that I should actually, not that I should, but that I do actually also want to be doing other things in my life. That harmony for me is that's a constant thing that I need to be reminded of.
Yes.
And those shades exist in all of us as well. I think that's often just about you, even like in a journaling practice, getting curious with what you believe that your strengths are, and then starting to think about, what context may this show up as a bit of an upper limit for me, or as a limitation. I've got a bit of a controversial opinion on this in terms of even, your human design and your astrology and your Enneagram. And, I firmly believe like fused thinking in any form is unhelpful thinking.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people currently who are fused with an identity that is linked to those frameworks.
Yes.
There's a woman yesterday I was speaking to actually, and she was saying to me that apparently the astrology chart is all off, and I'm actually I'm a different sign to what I thought I was, which also then would change my HD. And I just had such a reaction to it. Like I was so impartial and I firmly believe that's because of the psychological work that I've done. And that's why that's such a big part of my coaching, right? Is that, I wholeheartedly believe that my identity is constantly evolving and is bigger than any framework, belief system, prescription that is provided to me. I'm always open to feedback of a different sort.
Yes.
So I think that that's big as well, right? Almost looking at, because and a lot of the strength stuff, when people come to me, it's often they believe their strengths are things that have been reflected back to them, right? Well, I'm this in human design, so that's my strength. Like, okay, well, that's like a collection of things. And then actually let's unpack like what else you are outside of that as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the nuance and all the intricacies. We've already spoken about how multidimensional we are. Like, yeah. And I think that's why, like, look, I've definitely been someone who's kind of in the past attached myself to certain things that I've discovered going down these, looking into these self-awareness tools and systems and things. And some of it does feel really affirming, but I think it's important to not necessarily attach or grip too tightly to these things, because there is just so many more. There's just so much more that goes into who you are.
I've probably said this to you before, Mikka, but I'm kind of a bit famous for it in my coaching clients, but you flirt with things and you don't marry them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not marry it for the rest of our, and I mean that even that in itself now is probably problematic given the divorce statistics, but, let's not like fuse ourselves to things for the long term so that we're so closed off to any other possibility that's outside of us. Like you can see how quickly that can become really limiting. Whereas when we can be playful and curious and flirtatious in our energy and in our ideas, that's when we typically birth genius.
Yes, agreed. But, I think it's hard. I speak from my own experience with this and some beautiful friends of mine. I have one who just in the last, year has really been like, I need to connect back in with what I find fun. Like what is fun and play for me, And I think we do, because we do have a lot going on. We're raising children, we're working, we're doing all the things. It can be really difficult I'm going to speak just more so for women, to connect with that playful energy outside of, maybe playing with our kids, if we're even good at that. And maybe we didn't have amazing examples of that, and that's why. But yeah, I feel like, I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like it's something really, really important. And honestly, I feel like it is something that you do embody. Like through what I see, I think, you guys love to travel, you love fun adventure, you're not afraid to try something new like surfing, and I think you were skateboarding or something recently as well. But I love this.
Very poorly.
Well, that's okay, but we've already spoken about this, okay? It takes time. you may not be an overnight skateboarding success, but you're willing to give it a go and you're willing to have fun with it. What do you think?
Which is interesting you say that, because that does not come naturally to me.
Right.
At
so
all.
then what is it for you? Like, how do you, I don't want to say push yourself, but what is it that gets you to engage with that?
I create conscious practices such as like reminders on my phone to prompt me to do those things.
Right. Okay.
And to check in with myself in terms of I'm very big on weekly sort of check-ins in my journal, like end of week checkouts. And I ask myself lots of reflective questions around where was I playful? Where did I bring, playful energy through? Knowing that it is something because of that, big work ethic, like devotion to my work, that I can sit in that seriousness space.
Yes.
And kind of like quite comfortably as well, if I'm honest.
Yes.
And I think it also helps, I am married to the most divine human on the planet, and it helps having him be very aware of my tendencies as well and lovingly prompt me out, because again, we don't live in an individualist culture, right? Like ideally, we have partnerships, we have friendships, we have communities to help us step into our higher self, like utilize those things around you to support you in those areas. Because I think sometimes as well, like, whether it's conversations in the clinic or with my coaching clients, and we're talking about, themes such as this of reconnecting with your joy, of reconnecting with play, I actually think that comes from initially, at least, starting to ask yourself more where you're experiencing that. Because perhaps you are actually feeling into that a little bit more than what you think. It's just you're not realizing that you are, because it looks different to what you think it should or what it has historically.
Yes, I was going to say that. It's like the expectation around what it should look like. Yeah, but you've got to figure out what it is for you. And it might take a bit of trial and error,
Yeah, because play is born from curiosity. So we have to start from that energy of curiosity before we can actually enter into play, joy, experimentation, kind of adventure.
Yes, and just being open to that as well.
Yeah,
being open to things surprising and delighting you. I wanted to quickly talk about something that I love that you do this with your friends. I think it's important. So obviously we've been speaking a lot about connection and, and having that community around us in all the different ways that can look. And something that you've shared before is that in order to make sure that you're getting connected time with your friends, you guys have, well, you can explain it a little bit more, but you have come up with a way to ensure that you have your trips away and you have that connection to each other. And I want you to share it because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, we have multiples. I have multiples of these in my lives now because I have very, it's interesting. I think you're either this way inclined or you're somebody who has all of your friends sort of connected in together, but I have very distinct friendship groups. So I have my high school friends. I've got my friends sort of from, like my first sort of boyfriend that I collected from his group of friends. And then I have my friends from my first mother's group.
Yeah.
And so I have 3 bank accounts with each of them, and we put $10 into them each week. And basically what happens with, let's say the mother's group one, for example, is that one person then is in charge of the trip each year and the pool of money, makes all of the bookings, all the activities, and then the rest of us just need to show up.
See, and I love this because someone who identifies as the person who always organizes things, I actually love that I could experiment with releasing control and not knowing what we're going to do.
It's the best. It is the absolute best. And so with my high school friends, we just went away to Adelaide and we had a weekend down there in the Adelaide Hills, which was really, really special. And with my mother's group friends, we went down, we actually just went down to Kingscliff. She has a daughter that has some special needs. So we sort of had to be a bit closer to home this time. But now that she's doing really well, we're planning next year. Well, I shouldn't say where we're planning in case they're listening, actually, because I'm in charge of managing the next trip. But we're going to venture a little bit further away, and yeah, it's just always fun. Like, we've done dance classes in the past and wine
just
tasting.
That planning process
and all sorts
would be
of activities
so fun.
And dinners, and yeah, just magic. So good. Highly recommend. It's like giving a Christmas to your best friends.
Yeah. And this is better than any gift you could ever give. You know what I mean? Any like material gift. And this is the thing. I'm just all about the experiences. And I think it doesn't even necessarily need to be a trip either. Like, this could literally just be a commitment that you make to have a meal all together. And it's a tiny amount if that's all that you can afford. But I wanted to talk about this because I think it's a really beautifully simple and practical way to make sure that you get together. Because we can be so busy all the time, and it can be so like months and months and months and months pass. You know, and this is just a really nice way to make sure that you do stay all connected and you have that quality time together. Yeah.
I think there's a real belief sometimes that probably we're not aware of, that, you know, fun equals spontaneity, when for the majority of people who, you know, have a lot going on in their lives, in, you know, their 30s, their 40s, as they sort of progress through life, there's a lot of hats, there's a lot of responsibility. Things just don't tend to happen. They don't tend to unfold unless we're really intentional with how we're investing our time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad we spoke about this.
Happy to.
Yeah, I love it so much. I want to close out with just a little bit of chat around food. You mentioned earlier that it's really important to you to nourish your body with good quality foods. And I want to know, has your relationship to food always been like that? Is this something you've nurtured over the years?
That's a big question. So I've shared about this pretty openly on my Instagram, that I had quite a bad eating disorder in my 20s. So my relationship with food has absolutely not always been like this. And I wonder if almost the importance for it to me now is almost been born out of a bit of self-protection to not end up back there again.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of, I guess it has really evolved over time. I would say, like, and it's funny, isn't it? Because it's almost like what can sometimes look really healthy and wholesome to society can be what is actually most unhealthy inside as well. You know, to society, I probably looked like I was, you know, the epitome of healthy eating, but I wasn't eating anything that was cooked under 40 degrees. I was into like the raw food movement. It was very restrictive, and then was vegan for a while, and had a really rough time with food. Whereas now, food for me really represents I guess my relationship to self and nourishment first and foremost, but even more so than that, it's about bringing people together and family dinners and sharing that with people. That's where like the most joy comes from for me, is that connection element that I think sharing a meal provides.
Yes. And I mean, that's what connects us all. I mean, we all have to eat.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. I think for me too, like, I mean, I definitely grew up within a family where, you know, we did the meal times were all together. So that is something I've always really valued. And I know it's not necessarily the same for everyone else, but it certainly has just become even more important to me. That is where we have some of our best conversations with our children, is around the dinner table. So, or the breakfast bar, or, you know, whatever it might be. And yeah, it's really important for me to kind of pass that on to the kids as well, I think.
So nice.
If you have just a fun question to finish that I ask everyone, and that is, if you could only eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, that's so tough. It's funny. Bennett, my husband and I will often talk about, you know, what's it called? The death row meal.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not a meal. Like, I feel like the meal would be definitely some kind of French mussels. with like charred broccolini and like a
Yep.
white wine creamy sauce.
Mhm.
Like, oh, so good. If it was just like a more of a food that I was given, it would be like some kind of warm sourdough bread with really high quality butter.
I mean, you need that with the mussels. So they go together.
We can combine. It's okay with me. You can have both.
Exactly. That's why I said, well, this is the thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be the one plate, right? We're thinking about the whole, there are certain things that you just must have together. And definitely with mussels and some kind of creamy sauce, I'm feeling this, sourdough and butter and a glass of like crisp white wine.
Yes, delicious. That sounds great. Sign me up.
Go and have
When are you cooking it?
Thank you so much for this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming in here and sharing all of your wisdom and also sharing about some of, your personal life as well and some of the things that you've moved through. I don't take that lightly, and I'm really grateful for the work that we've done together in the past, and it's certainly meant a lot to me and meant a lot to my self-discovery journey as well. And you're a really important person, and I think the work that you're doing is vital. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy to have this time with you in this way.
Doesn't Monique just have the most wonderful energy? If you would like to connect with her, learn more about her work, then I encourage you to click on either of the links in the show notes. I can and will personally vouch for her brilliance. If something in this conversation resonated with you, please share it with a friend. It means so much. You can also hit follow or leave a review. Take care and have a beautiful week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Nourished Woman. I hope something in this conversation resonated with you, and if so, please share it with a friend. You can hit follow or write a review or simply share on social media. It would be amazing. Thank you so much again for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself.